without further ado, I wanted to introduce everyone to Shelby. Shelby is one of the top agents, runs one of the top teams in all of KW. She's out in California, 113 million in annual volume, 2.7 million in GCI. She's owner of the number one team in her region. She has 21 members on the team. She's also an operating partner and a coach, a trainer. She's a busy travel schedule, teaching all around the country. I don't know when she has time to sleep, much less come here today to teach us, but I'm excited she did. So I'll turn it over to Shelby. Thanks for joining us today, Shelby.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Al. I love doing this kind of stuff. I wish we were all in a room together. So you guys have to promise me that we're just going to pretend that we're all in a room together, okay? Is that fair? I need
Sounds
like
good to
this
me.
stuff going on and oh, good, I got this stuff. Great, awesome. I love being in the trenches with people, and I love helping people and things and houses transform. And usually they're based on all of the failures that I've experienced along the way. So to Al's point, I run the More Real Estate Group with my partners here in Greater Sacramento, Northern California. We were proud to achieve the number one spot in the region last year. Very, very excited about that. I've got 21 amazing people on our team. It doesn't mean that we're perfect, but we sure work hard. And I think I'm most proud of our culture of our team. And some of the things that Al did not say is that I'm also a mom to a 10-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. And 2 years ago, I got on 34 outbound flights. Okay. There are 12 months in the year, which means I left home while running my team and being a mom and being an OP at the time, 34 times, about once every week to week and a half. I have an illness called not knowing how to say no. Has anybody ever experienced that illness? Please tell me I'm not alone in that. Okay. And part of that is because KW and certainly some other industries attract entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs run hard. Is that right? And would everyone agree with some of the stuff that Orly talked about? Like, this has been a harder market. And so sometimes all we hear is work harder, do more, right? But at the end of the day, we also have to be able to live. We've got to pay attention to our health. And these are all things that we hear. But I just kind of want to share some of the pointers that I have learned along the way to be able to manage what Orly referred to as this work-life harmony. There is no perfection. And I think one of the things that's really important to hear today is that you don't hear this message once and go, okay, got it. I'm going to master this whole like work-life balance thing. I don't ever need to hear it again. In fact, I think we have to revisit the topic a couple times a year because it's important to reset and go, shoot, I might have fallen into my cycles, or I might have fallen into my patterns. And so I'm just going to share some things that I've learned along the way, as I've also learned to pay attention to my patterns. So 4 years ago, I hired Jordan Freed as my MAPS coach. Jordan and I also do some coaching together. But one of the very first things that he brought to my attention was, yes, he is legit, was to pause and think about what patterns I have repeated in my life. And one of them was absolute destructive burnout. And when I burn out, I have a pattern of just starting over. Like, I throw away whatever I'm doing and I start over. And I don't know about you, but the older I get, I don't want to start over again, right? I'm going to be 44 on Tuesday. I don't have time to start over again. But I had this pattern of every 2 to 4 years of throwing away whatever I was doing and thinking I had to start over just to clear my mind. In 2013, I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I actually lived in the South for about 6.5 years, even though I'm from California. And I worked around the clock. I was in corporate America at that point, and I would go to the office, be there by 7:15. I'd get a call from my husband, usually around 6:30 or 7 p.m. And he would say, "Are you coming home tonight?" And I'm like, "What time is it?" Like I was so just in the zone of my work that I just wasn't even aware of what was happening around me. Now, I didn't have children at the time, but then I would go home and he would have cooked dinner, which is very gracious of him. I think you do have to have good partnerships in your life to do all the things that you want to do. And then I'd open up my laptop and I'd, get back to work after dinner and it'd be 11 o'clock and he'd like, hit my side and say, Shelby, you fell asleep. Should we go to bed? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, let's do that. And then I'd just repeat the same thing every day. And when I was in corporate America, I wasn't paid to work on Saturdays and Sundays, except for that I was salary, right? I was an exempt employee. But I would also carve out one day of my weekend and go back into work because I just had too much to do. Now, to be honest with you, it was my fault that I had too much to do. And I want you to hear that because that is the premise of what we're going to talk about today. It was my fault that I had too much to do. Okay. I was the person that didn't create boundaries. I was the person that didn't prioritize. And I was the one that set the tone and the expectation that everyone could get everything they wanted from me anytime they needed it. So this concept of patterns and cycles also has to start here with being aware enough of the things that we need to internally change to gain control of our future in our life. So I have a little, yes, no is a complete sentence. And we're going to talk about that today. So I have a little slideshow here that I've put together, just kind of walk through some of these concepts. And I call it the leveraged life. And so, here's the deal. Every single one of us on this Zoom has work. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this Zoom. You all go to work, right? And for me, that includes selling. I haven't stopped selling yet. And also leading our team of 21 people. And then traveling. 2 years ago, when I recognized I was traveling too much, I went from 34 outbound flights to 11 outbound flights. Now, for some of you, that's still too many, but that works for me. And then I'm a pastor's kid. I grew up in the church, so my faith is super important to me. So church every Sunday, that kind of thing is super important to me. Then I've got my family. And here's the deal. 2 years ago, when I was traveling a ton, my kids were 2 years younger, 2.5 years younger. They didn't have like the baseballs, the softballs, the cheerleading, all these things that they now have at an older age. So I noticed that year they started to get busier and busier. And there were these school rallies on Fridays. And my sweet kiddos wanted me to be at these school rallies too, right? So it's not just about, well, I have a husband and I have kids and I have to go spend time with them, but they also have all these activities, right? And then I've got aging parents. Anyone here have aging parents? Kind of important for me to pay attention to them, right? Kind of important for me to make sure I'm spending time with them. And then we've got this thing called health. I would like to also add here friends. What's funny about that is those are the two that I probably pay the least attention to. Right? And there's a Harvard study about the quality of your life being directly proportionate to whether you really have relationships and friendships. And that has to do with your happiness on the Harvard happiness study. And it's one of the first things that I tend to give away. And then I have things on here like, oh, shoot, my car needs an oil change. Or, oh, shoot, I'm doing a home remodel. That same year that I flew out 34 times, I did a $400,000 renovation to my home. Built out 400 square feet, had to replace the sewer line, had to rewire the home. We had to live out of the house for about 4 months in hotels because I always thought it was only going to be 2 or 3 weeks, right? Life happens. Then we have to go to the dentist. We have to go to the doctor. And oh, by the way, we should probably vacation. And don't tell me that we have time for problems because nobody has time for problems, right? Because of all this list of stuff that we've got ahead of us that is just part of our life. So from that standpoint, this is typically how we feel. Anyone else feel like this is like your life often? You've got all these things you've got to juggle and you've got to keep moving. So the question is, how do we get past that? Well, here's the thing that is most important to realize. Again, awareness is really, really critical to the solution to your life's journey. And I know that is really cliche, awareness is the first step, but it is so true. Look at this data. 76% of respondents in a Mental Health America and Flex Job study agreed that workplace stress affects their mental health, and 75% experienced burnout. Qualtrics found that 79% of workers across 26 countries felt at or beyond their work capacity in 2020. And by the way, this is not, a political statement, but women tend to feel that more than men. Burnout happens when you avoid being human for too long. Might be a good thing to write down. Burnout happens when you avoid being human for too long. We are not machines, but sometimes we show up and that's how we behave. We just have to get through everything. God forbid we have time for breathing or taking in and smelling the roses, right? And some of you go, maybe I haven't experienced burnout. Okay, candidly, I suffer from anxiety. So burnout is kind of a thing for me. But keep in mind that burnout can just be capacity issues. And that might show up in exhaustion or in lack of energy or constant fatigue or sleep disorders or reduced performance or concentration and memory problems or your inability to make a decision. That is one of my first triggers when I have the inability to make even small decisions. Reduced initiative and imagination. You guys, white space creates creativity. It's where your imagination is born. But most of the time, if we're living a machine versus a life, we condense how much imagination or creativity that we get to experience. And that creativity fuels some of your energy. And by the way, let's be clear, and Gary Keller talks a lot about this, and many of you who've been to Family Reunion or Mega Camp or been on listened to some of his podcasts, he talks about multitasking. He may say it a little bit kinder than this. He may say multitasking, is impossible. It just means you're doing a bunch of things and probably not doing any of them well. But I prefer this definition: the art of screwing up several things at once. Multitasking is the art of screwing up several things at once. And so this is typically our business and our life. And sometimes you can look at your production as a trigger or as an indication of quote unquote burnout. We don't have to call it that. But anyone ever felt like they're just like their business is the same all the time? Like every year you're not maybe getting a whole lot further and you're just kind of waking up and doing the same thing and living on this hamster wheel we call life. So I want you to take a moment. I'm going to ask you to actively participate. Remember, we're in a room with one another, right? I'm going to ask you to actively participate for just a moment. And we teach this in career visioning. So I want you to take the next minute and I want you to write down your definition of freedom. I'm going to ask one or two of you to share it with me. I want you to stop and write down your definition of freedom. I'm going to give you about a minute. Maybe about 30 more seconds. Your definition of freedom. And remember, we're in a room together, so I'm going to ask a couple of you to share. I'm excited. Okay, who's got something for me?
I'll go. This is Orly.
Hi, Orly.
And as I wrote, being rich is having money. Having time to do whatever you want is being wealthy. Yeah. And freedom is when you have both of them.
Okay. Love that. Really, really good. Okay.
All right, I raised my virtual hand.
Thank you, Ira.
This is Ira. I'll say that freedom is being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, without having any responsibility to others.
Yeah, you bet. Okay.
And both Orly and I are James Shaw people.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. Anybody else want to pipe in? There is no definition. Okay. Is your name Eugenia? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Eugenia.
Freedom to me is grounding myself to feel creativity.
To fuel creativity. Why is that
So,
important to you, out of curiosity?
I love to paint. I love to DIY things. I don't know why, but like I'm obsessed with like taking old furniture and painting it and making it into something else. I do
Okay.
it at my house in upstate a lot. And when I ground myself, when I really find my own kind of inner voice,
Yeah.
it fuels my creativity even more. And when I do, I actually feel a lot of freedom in that. And I feel very uplifted in my own intuition.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else that is dying to share your definition of freedom before we move on? A couple of other ancillary questions to that, if you get stuck in that. I think we do commonly hear what Ira and Orly had shared, which is this concept of, most of us still need money. Most of us want time. And when you have both, that equates to freedom. Also said as being able to do the things I want to do when I want to do them, right? Or what are the things that you love? And Eugenia reminded me of that. She loves to paint. Could anyone feel peace as she was talking about painting? I could. I was like, that makes me breathe. Because I could tell that was like your insides coming out saying, oh, I need that. That's part of what gives me life. That's part of what gives me joy. So another thing to ask yourself, if anybody gets stuck in this, is how do I love to spend my time? How do I love to spend my time? And then secondarily, if you still need money, what do you need money for? What is that doing for you? Hava, do you have your hand raised?
Yes. Hello,
Yay.
everyone.
Bye.
Freedom myself is the level up and the manage the time.
Great. Love that. The level up. I love that part. I actually think most of us thrive on growth. I think that we're either, and I heard this a long time ago when I was in corporate America, you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. And ripe and rotting sometimes happens without our awareness. I love that we belong to a training-based company. I love that Al sets up these opportunities for people to come in and plug in for you, just like I do elsewhere, to make sure that my tank continues to get filled and that I continue to fuel my mind. I think it's this concept of growth is really important. It keeps us alive. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So let's get into some solutions here. One of the things that I think is really important is when we run hard, we sometimes lose our value in why we do what we do. Right? We can call that the big why. We can call it our purpose. We can call it our calling. One of the very best books I ever read was actually a book by Oprah. What was it called? Gosh, something about friendship. I'll come back with it. But she also said this: there's no greater gift you can give or receive than to honor your calling. It's why you were born and how you became most truly alive. So when we heard this concept of, I love to paint, right? That is part of what fuels her, and may not be her calling for making money, but all of you chose real estate for a reason. You're here for a reason. Most of you, it's because you like people and you like houses. I'm sure that there's more to it. I'm sure that there's a reason that you chose this path as opposed to another. But it's really easy to just get caught in this routine of busyness and just waking up and doing the same thing. And the routine and the patterns of good habits is good for us, because we know that consistent input will give us consistent output, right? Activity equals outcomes. You don't lead gen, you don't follow up, you have no closings. We know that those patterns and those habits are good. But why did you choose to engage in a career that required those patterns as opposed to something else? Why are you not a teacher or a scientist or whatever it is for you? I think it's really important to make sure that you get re-rooted in why you chose this path, because it's your purpose that gives you that first bit of energy to pursue greatness in whatever it is that you do. But purpose without priority is powerless. So we've all been taught about this concept of time blocking over and over and over and over again. Raise your hand if you've ever attended a class that talks about time blocking. Every one of us, okay? Here's the deal. You can look at my calendar. It's time blocked, but the question is, am I doing what I'm supposed to do during that blocked time? Or am I doing other things during that blocked time? Because most of us here have been to enough courses, again, thank goodness, based on how KW has trained us to think, and that we have to block our time. But we have so many distractions. One of the very first things I tell some of the agents on my team is, if you are someone that is wired to look elsewhere when you're supposed to be looking forward, specifically when it comes to lead generation or lead follow-up, then print off your list of people that you need to do follow-up with or lead generation with and close your computer. Because what happens when we have our computer open when we lead generate?
You don't lead generate.
Yeah, you do everything else. Your emails notify you on my computer, and I probably need to turn this off. My texts come across my screen. I've got Slack for my team. I mean, there's a million other distractions that are coming at us left and right. So while time blocking is important, and it is, and make sure that you master the concept of what your calendar should look like, and we're going to talk about that at the end before we finish up today. It also your lack of ability to get everything done may be more rooted in actually doing what you're supposed to be doing during those time blocks versus allowing yourself to be distracted by so many other things. Did you know that we're interrupted by others an average of 43 times a day? We're interrupted by others an average of 43 times a day, and on average that means every 11 minutes. Joyce is like, oh dear God. Right? It happens. So purpose, as soon as you get re-rooted in your purpose, that's important, but purpose without priorities is powerless. So maybe it's just that you need to get a handle on what are the priorities I need to accomplish today so that I don't get distracted by all the 80%. We call that the 20% at KW, right? And then you need a plan. And that is not rocket science. That is not rocket science. When do we typically go to like a business planning clinic? When do we typically put together our business plans? Q4, right? October, November. And then like everything else, January 1st rolls around and we've just been eating for a month and a half. Thanksgiving, Christmas, like the eating doesn't stop, right? And so we all think we should go to the gym on January 1st and we're going to lose weight. And then by January 27th, nobody's going anymore, or they're going once a week. And by February 16th, that went out the window. We never looked at that plan. We never prioritized that plan. And the same thing happens with our GPS when we create our business plan. We put it together at the end of the year because that's the time that we focus on it, but then we depart from our plan. So remember that your plan is a tool, not a report. This is something important to write down, I think. Your plan is a tool, not a report. A report is something that you look at once, analyze, and move on. A tool is something that you bring out time and time again to help you build a house or to help you accomplish a goal. It has to be used as something that's just in your tool belt, okay? Your life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change. So it might be that you need to get rerooted in your purpose, or it might be for you that you just need to make sure that you prioritize your blocks of time. But there has to also be a plan. And so let's talk about what should be included in your plan. One of the most powerful things I was ever told, everybody on this Zoom should write this down, is performance equals potential minus interference. You guys, it is so simple. Performance, or you can call that achievement, or you can call that life by design, equals your potential minus your interference. Does anybody here have any interference? Name some interference. Give me ideas. What is interference? Please get yourself off of mute for just a moment. Give me all the things that you think of.
Family obligation.
Family obligation. What else?
Social obligations.
Social obligations. Yeah. Okay. What else?
Day-to-day chores.
Day-to-day chores. Dang, I hate having to do those things. Laundry, right? We're going to talk about those things later. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of interference. So this is one of those things that you should write down and you should keep it like on the top of your laptop. Performance equals potential minus interference. Now, some of the interference we can't control, but don't trick yourself into believing that we cannot control most of it. So then we just have to get a handle on what is the interference? What is the interference? Now, we don't have time to do this today, but I am going to ask that you start to name some things that you do that might be an 80% part of your job, right? We all have a full job. 20% of it of what we do is what dictates the results or the outcomes that we need. But we all have this other 80%. Give me some ideas of what might exist as an agent as an 80% item versus a 20% item. Here's a clue. There's only 5 things that are in your 20% as an agent. Anyone know what they are?
Role play and practice.
What?
Role play and practice.
Yeah.
Go to appointments, negotiate contracts, lead generation, follow up.
Yep. That's it. That's it. Those are the things that give you a closing, much less multiple closings, which, by the way, just as a reminder, that's what enables you to take home money to fund your family and your life, right? But we have a slew of other things that we do. Now, when I came back into real estate, I came in as a team leader in 2014. And my son, my first child, was 13 weeks old. So I came into that role and I said, when can I get an assistant? I want to make sure that I'm not just great at what I do as a team leader, as a business leader, but I also want to make sure that I am even better at being a mom. So I need to be able to leave here and go home and be present with my son, which means that knowing my illness of thinking I can do all things needed to be solved on day one. So my first question was, when can I get an assistant? Now, my then OP said, when you get to this agent count, when you get to this profit level, that's when we'll get you an assistant. I said, great. So for 8 months, and I want you to really hear this because this was the most life-altering exercise I ever did. For 8 months, every time I caught myself doing something that was in my 80% and not in my 20%, I wrote it down on a document. And back then it wasn't Google Docs, it was just Microsoft Word. Now here's the danger. You can't write it on a Post-it note and on a notepad and on your phone. It all has to be in the same place. And 8 months later, I hired someone named Sean Masters who changed my world immediately. My productivity went up and my ability to spend more time at home and be present at home went up. And very quickly, we wound up in the top 10 market centers in the country. So my point in saying that is we did the job well. But for the first time in my life, I got a handle on what my true priorities were. And I did it because for 8 months, I wrote down everything that I was doing that was not in my 20%. So the moment she came on board with me, I had a 3.5-page job description, and all I had to do was train her on all the things that I needed to give away. But some of us, when we bring people into our life, aren't even aware of all the things that we do. Right? So I'm going to ask you to do a time audit exercise, and I want you to write that down, a time audit exercise. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to do it for 8 months. I'm not suggesting that. But honestly, if you did it for 1 or 2 weeks, you'd quickly find out how full your life is of things that you don't have to do. It is the most simple, life-altering exercise you can do. I promise. But do it all on one document. And by the way, I'm not talking about writing paragraphs. These were simple little bullet points, usually as I was running from one thing to another. Okay. So let's talk about what to do with that once you find out what you're actually doing, because a lot of us do things and we aren't even aware of all that we do. How do you, once you find out all that you're doing, make decisions about what to do? Well, one of the things that I had to do after spending time 2 years ago, flying out 34 times, is I realized that I had become a yes person. Some of us here become a yes person a lot, correct? And Jordan challenged me to think back through this statement. Not that I hadn't heard it before, but sometimes you don't hear things until you hear them. Meaning you might see them, you might hear them today, but it might not stand out to you until you're at this crossroads in your life. And at that point in time, I was at a crossroads. And he said, Shelby, remember, when your values are clear, decisions become easy. When your values are clear, decisions become easy. So my kids are my most important value, right? So I learned that I was saying yes to things that weren't in alignment with what was most important for my time with my kids. And here's the other one. And since I'm a pastor's kid, I'm not much of a cusser. And some of you are going to be like, Shelby, this isn't cussing, but this feels like cussing to me, okay? This also became the lens in which I learned to make decisions about what and who I say yes to. If I don't immediately think it's a hell yes, the answer is it's a hell no. Every one of you are going to get asked to do things, right? Or asked to participate in things, or you're going to be faced with choices about what you can get involved with. Well, remember that every yes is going to require more time from you. And when you say yes to something that requires more time from you, my question is, what are you giving away? Because at some point in time, you can't just pack it into the day, that extra thing that you just said yes to. Every single one of us only has 24 hours in a day. And I'm pretty sure that we're supposed to sleep some of that. So my lens became, if I don't immediately say absolutely, like this is yes, I want to do this, then the answer is no. But you can't hesitate because you all have instincts and you all have intuition. So this concept of like when your values are really, 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 really clear and you can't have 25 values, then decisions become easy. And when you start making decisions that are in alignment with your values, you're going to find that you're probably going to say yes to less. And then if you use this as the secondary lens, if you're still having trouble making decisions about what you're inviting into your time, this has been a life-altering statement for me. If I don't immediately say yes, then the answer is no, without hesitation. Okay? Now, let's continue to figure out how to get more leverage, because at this point in time, you're aware based on the time audit exercise. And please, please, please do yourself a favor and do that. Write down everything that you're doing for the next week or two. Okay? As you go. Then you need to realize that once you've learned what to say no to, maybe that's going to be enough for you. But some of you are going to need even more leverage than that. And there's many, many books about this, and they've made their way around KW too, but we have to remember that it's about who, not how. So if we want to do more, we have to remember that it's who, not how. When our team goes to 300 units, or 350 or 400 or 500. That's not about work harder or how are we going to do it? Yes, it will be created inside of a framework of clear strategies for sure. But I can't move that mountain on my own, and neither can you. And for some of you, that might be going 15 units to 30 units. I'm giving you examples that are relevant for me. But we also have to remember that it's not just about how are we going to do more. It's about who we need in our lives to enable us to do more, if more is really the goal. And Gary Keller said this in 2000, gosh, this was just before COVID, I believe. I think this was November 2019. I was in a room with him and he was leading us for a couple days. And he said, your work ethic might be killing you, your opportunity, if your day is determined by what you do versus what gets done. Let me say that again. Your work ethic might be killing your opportunity. Some of us are still raising our hands for opportunity. And opportunity can mean specific roles, but it can also mean financial opportunity to be able to start purchasing investment properties. It might mean making more money to take our families on vacation. There are a myriad of things that this word opportunity can mean. But sometimes we work so hard that we actually don't make enough progress to create opportunity. Your work ethic might be killing your opportunity if your day is determined by what you do versus what gets done. That is the framework of who, not how. And secondarily, if you do things outside of your unique ability, you're probably the choke point in your business and the reason you're not growing. Raise your hand if you think that you are gifted at all parts of a transaction, like the lead generation, the lead follow-up, the marketing, the client care, the scheduling and inspections, the transaction coordination. Are we wired to be gifted at every single part of that? No, but a lot of us are doing the things that are not in our gift zone, which often means that we're the choke point in our own opportunity. Who, not how. Secondarily, and this is one we don't talk about very often. Who, not how, home. We just talked about who, not how, work. But now we're talking about who, not how, home. Who has a hairdresser? Raise your hand if you have someone cut your hair or color your hair or whatever, right? There are a multitude of examples of things that we ask for help from someone else with. Most of us, if we cut our own hair, would probably look different in not a positive way, right? We easily give up these things that we know we have to give away. We know we need a hairdresser. Who here changes your own oil? Most of us don't. Some of you do. But the truth is there's these really simple, easy things that we know to give away. But one of the things that I very quickly learned to do, and I actually did this way back in the Carolinas when I was a team leader, because I knew that when I did travel, which I traveled less then, but when I did travel, I would come home and I had 2 babies at home and I wanted to spend time with them. But I also had this big suitcase that needed to be unpacked. You have to think about the simple things that you do that maybe aren't for you. I decided that I would rather be present with my babies than unpack my suitcase. Why can't I give unpacking my suitcase away to someone else? What that meant for me is we had a house cleaner who came twice a month, not frequently, but twice a month. And she was a young girl. And when I asked her, hey, do you want to also unpack me? I'll pay you more. It was a win-win. I paid her like $20 to unpack me every time I went on a trip. I didn't even have to ask it. If she came in the house and there was a suitcase, she unpacked it for me. And that enabled me to not have to spend, 30 minutes, 35 minutes unpacking, doing the laundry, etc., and just to be with my kids. Why don't we give things away like that? So the other thing that you can do is typically people in your life have birthdays. Is that right? Does anybody in your life have birthdays? My husband's is tomorrow. Anybody? There's also this holiday called Christmas that some people celebrate. I understand not everybody does. And usually at Christmas, there's also gifts, right? I don't go shopping for any gifts throughout the year, ever. My assistant does. That's one of the first things I give away. Because when I leave the office and go home, I want to be with my kids. I don't want to have to then leave the house and go buy birthday presents or go buy Christmas presents. But we don't think about tiny little things like that, right? If I added up how many people in my family and in my world had a birthday or Christmas, it's a ton. It's probably hours upon hours upon hours of my time. I don't wrap them. Now, I do dictate them. And Nikki, who's my assistant, she's right out there. We'll just collaborate on the first of the month about whose birthdays is coming up and what I want to get them. It's always my ideas. And then she goes to town and takes care of the rest. And if it has to be shipped because some people don't live here, she ships it. Why don't we think about little things at home that we can give away that enable us to be more present, or go to the gym if you don't have kids, right? Health is one of the last things we give any attention to. Maybe if you stopped doing little tiny things like that, you could go out for a walk every night instead of rushing back out the door to go do something else that needs attention. So I'd also ask you that in this time audit, you're going to come up with a bunch of things that you do at work, but don't forget to include all the things that you do at home too. We have to remember that maybe there's just a little bit of leverage that we can get at home in addition to the leverage that we can get at work that will give us a whole lot more time, that will enable us to make more money, that will create more opportunity. As we finish up, this might be something that would be very helpful for you. And Elizabeth, you're welcome to send this slide deck out afterward. That is totally fine with me. But here's a way to get control of your life by getting control of your calendar. Have you ever heard that either you control your calendar or your calendar controls you? Happens one way or the other, okay? So let's all pretend we had an absolute blank slate. There was absolutely nothing on your calendar. The first thing that you should add to it are your personal priorities. Now, in my life, my husband drops our kids off at school and picks them up in the afternoon, except for Fridays. I pick my kids up on Fridays. And everybody on my team knows that that is a non-negotiable. As of 2:15 on Fridays, I'm done. There are no meetings on Friday afternoons. That is my time to pick up my kids. So that's the first thing that went on my calendar. The second thing that should be on your calendar are vacations. And the perfect model for vacations, by the way, is this concept of a 12-week year. Work for 12 weeks, take a week off. Work for 12 weeks, take a week off. Work for 12 weeks, take a week off. It's a really good cadence. Reviews. Should you be reviewing your business? Say yes. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. Once a month, I drive myself up to Tahoe because it's an hour and 10 minutes from here. And I sit at the Ritz-Carlton in the lobby because they serve me champagne and charcuterie all day. And I just review my business. I look at my plan, what went well, what didn't go well. And I look at my P&L. And I do it off-site, away from home. That is a personal priority because it enables me to get a grip on where I'm at. I also review my personal P&L, not just our business P&L. You need to have white space in your calendar. If not daily, then at least weekly. You need to have your health written into your calendar. When are you going out for a walk? When are you going to the gym? So those are the first things that should wind up on your calendar if you started over with a blank slate. Then number 2, next to personal priorities would be important weekly events. What are those important weekly events for you? For me, it's church on Sunday. So if there's an open house, I do not work them, and my team knows that I do not work them during church. It's non-negotiable for me. If I show homes, if I go on a listing appointment, I do not do it during church, period. It's non-negotiable for me. The moment you give up your priorities, everybody will take them. Can we all agree to that? And then Friday nights, we do family movie night. I don't say yes to friends. I don't say yes to events. We do family movie night. We make brownies, we eat popcorn, and we watch a movie. And by the way, my kids are 10 and 8, and they're not going to want to do that with me much longer. I realize there's a finite end to that. But for now, that's an extreme priority. And then we have standing work meetings, right? Right? Most of us have standing work meetings. Okay. Question is, sometimes we say yes to so many meetings. I believe meetings are a great place to make progress, but sometimes we say yes to so many meetings that we don't recognize that we're spending more of our time in a meeting that doesn't really contribute to our success. Good opportunity to make sure that if there is a meeting, it contributes to your success. And by the way, the best way to do that is to have an agenda. And let me say this, I have a document for our founders meetings. I'm actually the co-owner of the More Real Estate Group. There's 3 of us. And if there's something that I need to talk to my partners about all week long, I have a founders meeting document. And anytime during the week, I'll just throw whatever I need to talk to them about on that founder's talk all week long. And then on Fridays when we meet, which is right after this, we just bring up that document. And those are the things that we tackle. But remember the difference between urgent and important, right? Not everything needs to be addressed right away. But if you have a meeting, there's a standing meeting every week, that's a great way to very concisely get through the things that need to be done and make progress versus sitting in a meeting and wasting a bunch of time on a lack of clarity of what makes progress. And then the needle movers. By the way, notice here that the needle movers are number 4. After standing working meetings, after important weekly events, after personal priorities. So needle movers in our business, if you're an agent, is lead generation, lead follow-up, right? We all know we're supposed to do that between 9 and 12. And now we're going to get back to this commentary around, are we actually doing that between 9 and 12? And lastly would be training, family reunion, mega camp. I'm a big believer in learning. I'm a big believer in learning as the conduit to your growth in your business and your personal life. And that's the last thing that should make it on your calendar. And so remember, you're only as good as the patterns or cycles in your life. In the last 3-4 years, this is the first time that I've been able to break my cycle of burnout. Because my coach brought it to my attention. He said, what do you do that you've repeated over and over and over again? And I was starting over in life about every 2 to 3 years, over and over and over again. Doesn't mean that I don't have that indicator that pops up in my life. But the reason that was happening is because I was letting everybody else and everything else control what decisions I made in my life. And so if anybody is as old as me and never watched Bob Newhart, there's this cool little video and it's hilarious. You should just go Google Bob Newhart, Stop It. And this woman comes into his office and she's like, needing some therapy, and he's a therapist. And she tells him about her problems. And his only solution to her is to stop it. And so he leans forward and he goes, stop it. And really all she was complaining about was something very minimal that she couldn't change. She was like afraid of something. And she's like, what do you mean? Like, just stop it? And he goes, that's it. Just stop it. So I think it's really important that we get a handle on our patterns. We get a handle on our cycles. We get a handle on whether our calendar is controlling us or we're controlling it. And if the opposite is true and it is controlling you and your life and everything around it and everyone in it is controlling you, stop it. It's easier than you think. You just have to pause and reflect and make a change. And remember, easy choices, hard life. Hard choices, meaning it might be hard to stop and pause and do a time audit and figure out what leverage that you need to get, but it will lead you to an easier life where you smile more. I assure you. And that is, oh my gosh, 11:59, right on the dot, the end of my commentary around the leveraged life, so that you can do all the things that you want to do without sacrifice.
That was awesome. Thank you, Shelby. Do you have a couple minutes for some questions, or do you got to jump right in?
I'm good.
I actually had a question, and I was busy being a bad multitasker and answering a couple emails in there, and I shouldn't have. So you may have covered this, but I'm curious if did you go into specifically, like, how do you accomplish this in terms of, do you set up your day the night before, and is that a to-do list on a piece of paper, or are you doing that in a calendar, like electronically? Is it Google Doc? Like, how do you literally, manage your business?
Yeah. So on my team, and actually when I go out to market centers and teach, I've become fairly known for telling people to PP daily. Here's what that means. Post and plan daily. So at the very end of the day, it'll only take you 5 to 10 minutes if you do it every day. I record what happened that day, and then I plan for tomorrow so that I can get a grip on what's in front of me and what is a priority or something urgent versus important. And then what is something that I need to do versus I can give away to Nikki or other. Nikki, my assistant, calls me at 8:30 every morning because she knows I'm in the car on the way. And so I've done my post and plan the night before, and I already know what I need help with by the time that she calls me at 8:30. So that is one of the systems that I have in place. Because sometimes there's systematic things that she can do on an ongoing basis, but we all know, Al, that like there's things that just like pop up, right? And so I am really not good at remembering that I don't have to do everything. So that's my way around that, is I'll post and plan the evening before, and then she calls me at 8:30 and I know what to give away.
Are you saying post, like POST, post and plan?
Uh-huh.
You mean
Yeah.
literally post? Are you posting that somewhere publicly for so other people
Yeah,
can see?
on our spreadsheets. So for my team, I think it's really important that they don't feel like they're just constantly running toward their goals. So we define that as like, what do you need to do today to make sure that you set the appointments that you need to set this week to achieve the goal that you want to achieve this year. So for instance, when this gal Katie joined us, she had done 5 units at another brokerage prior to joining us. She'd only been in the business for 1 year and she wanted to do 25 units. And so all we did was reverse engineer that. And we found out that she needed to make 45 dials a day and make 9 contacts a day. And if she made those 9 contacts a day, then she could go home and know that she won, even if it didn't result in like an appointment or a pending or a closing yet. And so what I mean by posting is like at the end of the day, she would go in and, and record all that. And then we would decide that the priorities, that would include the priorities for the following day outside of that 9, because the only reason that 45 dials was important is so that she carved out enough time to get to 9 contacts. So then that's what we mean by posting and planning, is actually recording what you've done that day, and then determining the priorities that you need to do the following day. And by the way, she ended up doing 37 units, not 25.
Wow, that's awesome.
So that's what I mean.
I think you did a great job of talking about, leverage and bigger picture stuff, and really the most important stuff that we need to be thinking about. But I always like to ask people, is there one nugget, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, of something that you think the typical agent, could take away that you do, that they could try to replicate, that would help them generate business now in this market? I know there's no silver bullet, but is there any technique, some kind of marketing plan or way you're lead genning, or something you say in your listing, anything that they could take away and say, oh, I can take what Shelby told me and run and implement this in my business today?
Yeah. So I would say, write this down: mind share equals market share. Mind share equals market share. So our first step needs to be to make sure that we are dominating the mind share of the people in our database. And every one of us have a database. Raise your hand if you've heard of DTD2 from KW. Yep. Okay. So for us, we just actually have compartmentalized that and into something we call Manic Monday. So the model would suggest that you're supposed to call your entire database in a quarter, right? 3 months. What we've done is in January, we call A through I. In February, we call whatever the next set of alphabet is. And in March, we call R through Z. And we call it Manic Monday. We literally huddle together. We turn on the song Manic Monday. We make it fun. And then we just call our database. The other thing that we added in as a layer is once a month, we send out just a snapshot of what the market has been like in the previous month, since people are pretty curious about market conditions right now. So we do that once a month on a Friday as well. So those 2 things over time are going to get you way more database business. And I didn't say to go do 20 things. I said, make sure you're calling your database, whether it's DT, D2, or you have fun with it and do what we call Manic Monday once a month, because by the end of March, we've called our entire database, right? That has already shown up in more business for us. So I would say mind share equals market share, and make sure that you have a clear and concise and compelling plan with your database, because that's the people that you're going to get the most business from. And then if you need more business than that, because Al, you asked about right now business, there's no reason why you can't work 7 open houses a week. Now, I didn't say go do that. I'm just reminding you that there are people who walk through open houses that typically convert faster than database business. So if that was a long-term play, the first thing that I suggested, a short-term play might be to just add more open houses. you can do it on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday or a Friday. Like we think that they just have to be Saturdays and Sundays. That's not true. You can add other open houses in. And that's a really easy way to capture more right now business.
When you say you send out the update on the market, is that you do a general sort of your whole area and everyone gets the same one, or are you customizing it? I know this person is looking in this area, they get one update, or is it just get the same one?
Great question. So at the end of the year, so the first week of January, I actually wrote out a letter and we sent it to all of our VIPs. So make sure that you're ascertaining who your VIPs are. So every agent gets 50 to 100 VIPs, depending upon how long they've been with us. Some of our brand new agents only have 20, right? But our VIPs are the people that we've already done business with, past clients, or our raving fans. And so in January, we wrote a letter about the market and I wrote it for the team. We'll do the same thing next week is we'll send out a letter about the Q1 market. And it's very personalized. And then in between, we had like a postcard that was very different than what people would expect to see in the mail. And it gave statistics of our tri-county that we serve most frequently. It's the same data every month. And then here's the most important part, you guys. We have to sometimes interpret market data. Because just because we understand the story behind it doesn't mean that our clientele understands the story behind it. So what does this market data mean to them? So if we just say, well, average days on market is this, okay, why is that meaningful? And so we'll do that and show like that market data, but then I'll conceptualize it so people can understand how it impacts them. And so we'll write a little bit. And on the other side, it has the picture of our agent. It certainly has our brand, the More Real Estate Group, because this is about branding, but it also has something personal from our agents. And so each one of them has a template that we just have our marketing coordinator redo every month, once a month. And so on one side, it typically tells a story about our team. So we took our team to Mexico on a missions trip last month. And so we talked about what we did in Mexico. And then on the flip side, it was market data. But then don't forget to interpret the market data. Don't just put data. Not everybody knows what that means to them.
That makes a lot of sense. That's great.
Oh, by the way, then we put it in a black envelope, which is another way to brand ourselves because I want our database to know, oh, it's from the More Real Estate Group because it's a black envelope.
Very cool. Thank you. All right. I really appreciate you staying a little extra for the Q&A. Before we wrap it up, does anybody have a question for Shelby? Are there any in the chat, Elizabeth? Or we covered it all? Last chance. Anybody have a question? All right. Eugenia?
Yes, hi, I have a question. So as a brand new agent, well, I'm sort of brand new, but not really. But question, what can I delegate? Because when you're starting out, I feel like you have to do everything, right? You have to do lead generate. You got to go to all the open houses. You got to do all your like you have to do it all because people have to know about you, right? So you're self-promoting.
Yes, absolutely. But remember that your 20% dictates 80% of your results. So I think part of this, Eugenia, is making sure that you understand what drives closings and not trick yourself into believing that you have to do everything. I think sometimes the first thing that you can give away is transaction coordination because oftentimes there are third-party TCs that you can just pay per file. So as far as specific delegation, I think that you could give that away. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, just you have to focus on the 20% that drives closings and not trick yourself into believing that you have to do all things. And that is just in a prioritized time-blocked plan. That would probably take me a lot longer to answer. And I could give you some more detail to that. But in short, that's the answer.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Well, again, Shelby, this was great. The feedback in the chat is super positive, and I know I learned a lot. I really appreciate you taking time with us on a Friday. And thanks so much. If we could ever return the favor, we certainly will. Everyone, if you have referrals for the Sacramento, Folsom, is it Folsom?
Yep. Our office is in Folsom. It's all around Sacramento. We serve all the tri-counties all the way up to actually Tahoe on both sides, just not Nevada.
All right. So send your Northern California referrals to Shelby as a thank you, and she'll take great care of your clients. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Shelby.
Okay. Bye-bye.